So we are in the latter portions of the series on becoming aware. And this series, we've really taken a look at becoming more aware of ourselves and becoming more aware of God and how those two will work together in helping us create a better awareness around ourselves and who God is. And we have spent several weeks in that now, and we've got about, including this week, I think we have 3 more weeks left. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that I feel is extremely important, and it's difficult and it's hard for us to wrap our minds around because we've lived in a period of time that really doesn't embrace this. And so I know it might be difficult to hear, but I just want to encourage you to please think your way through it, pray your way through it, read Scripture, and let the Spirit lead you into these things. Just because they might be difficult concepts doesn't mean they're not true. Today we're going to be talking about the subject of we love our feelings. Now, as I was thinking through this, last week I was making fun, I think it was last week that I was making fun of that really awful Survivor song, that The Search Is Over. It was just a really bad song, Jordan, just really bad. And my mind drifted this week as I was preparing this sermon to a song back in the 70s. Yes, I was alive during the 70s. I was 3 years old at the time. Thank the Lord I didn't have to hear it in real time. But the 70s was a really mixed decade of music. Some great music happened in the 70s, but man, the 70s gave us some really bad music and bands like Kiss and Iggy Stardust and all of those guys. But anyway, there's this song that was the epitome of bad. Actually happened in the middle of the decade in 1975. It was sung by a guy named Morris Albert. And the song's name is Feelings. And I can't get that out of my brain as I was preparing this sermon. It's, you know, that song, Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Whoa, oh, and it's a wailing song. I can't even, just a horrible song. And if you have the guts to go listen to it, you can. I just want to tell you the video that you'll watch with it's even worse than the song. But it does bring me to the subject that we're talking about today, which are feelings. And I think we need to really look at what feelings are and aren't, and then we're going to bring in something here in a little bit that I think will help us with these areas. So, we love feelings. There's nothing wrong with feelings. God created us actually to have feelings. Actually, we're like God in that way because God, in Scripture, we can see, demonstrates feelings and emotions. We also see that Jesus does as well. Jesus demonstrated emotion. We see at a time where he gets angry. We see a time where he's crying. We see times where he's actually laughing and leaping for joy and dancing. You say, when was that? Well, that was when the disciples reported back to him, and he was talking about seeing Satan fall from heaven, and it actually there, if you look at it, it's actually Jesus rejoicing in the fact of that truth. So we see that the God who created us, he himself demonstrates that he has feelings and emotions, and he created us to be the same way. So there's nothing wrong with feelings. Feelings just are. However, we can get into some pretty tough situations when we allow our feelings to rule over us. It's the same for our thoughts. And a few weeks ago, when I was talking through our crisis series, that feelings, emotions, and thoughts, they go hand in hand. So when I feel something, it produces a thought. Or when I think something, it produces a feeling. And we talked about the fact that just because I think something doesn't mean it's right, nor did that thought actually come from me, because we are not in control of what we think. Actually, we're in control of what we do with what we think, but it's also connected to our emotions. And so what we feel sometimes is not always true. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not true. They're just feelings. And so we have to figure out what can we bring to this circular pattern that we're always in between thoughts and emotions? What can we bring into that to actually moor us, to actually bring us into a place that we're anchored, where something enters into the equation that helps us sort out feelings, emotions, and our thoughts? And what is that? So while we have a culture that loves feelings, and feelings prevail primarily, we love sentiment. I think one of the funniest things I've seen during the pandemic is when all the celebrities got together on their gazillion-dollar yachts and spelled out "We are together" out in a lake or an ocean. And I'm thinking, no, we're not together. Most of us are trying to put food on the table, and you're sitting in your billion-dollar yacht. So it's like we love sentiment. We love emotion over substance. And we can see that with our leaders. We can see that a lot of times within the culture that we're in. And unfortunately, it overrides something that actually God has given us to help moor our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts. So the question then is, what is that? What can we bring into the equation to help us sort out our emotions, to help us sort out the feelings that arise and the thoughts that come up? What can we bring? And the answer to that is truth. Now, again, we live in a culture that values emotion and feeling over truth, because truth has become what I feel about something versus what actually truth is. Now, truth can be kind of ruthless at times, because truth doesn't care about our emotions or our thoughts. Truth just is. Now, there's a whole host of examples that come to mind around truth and emotion and current hot topics and all of those kind of things. So I don't need to point those out. Those have already come into your mind. But truth doesn't care about that. Truth just is truth. And we can ignore truth. We can actually take truth and twist it. We can take truth and rearrange it. But nevertheless, what we've done is made it not truth. Truth just is. And that's hard for us. And one of the other things that's hard about truth is oftentimes we forget it. And so we're in a constant cycle of rediscovering and discovering truth all the time. We rediscover truths from the past that our minds have forgotten, and we're constantly looking forward and discovering new truths about who we are, about our planet, about culture, about the solar system, etc., all the science. We're constantly discovering new truths. So truth isn't static. Truth is something that hasn't been just at one point and never evolved. Truth is something that we're discovering, and we haven't discovered it all. And that's the great and amazing things, is that we're still understanding and rediscovering it all. So truth is this huge concept. However, for us as believers, we were given something that really encases for us, especially around the ideas of spirituality, around the ideas of how we should act towards God, how we should act towards others, how we should love, how we should respond, all of those things. We were given truth as a model so that we can pattern ourselves after that model. And the truth that we were given is Jesus Christ. And Jesus, God, man, living in flesh, dwelt among us. Truth amongst us. So we can not only understand what we should be like as humans, but we get this super clear picture of what God is like, because we were given Jesus. God himself encased in flesh. Now, one of the important things that I want to bring out is that words matter. Words matter deeply in Scripture, and sometimes when we approach Scripture, we could have a tendency of making something mean more than actually the writers meant, or we can make it less than what the writers have meant. So let me give you a couple examples. So last week, I talked about this idea around creation, and when God says it's good, he wasn't declaring it was perfect. Now, for those of you that grown up in the church a long time, we have been taught about this perfection. However, that's not what the word good is. The word good in Hebrew is the word tob, or T-O-B. And that word, if we were using it today, if the writers were writing about creation today, that word is actually beautiful, charming, even handsome. It's not a shallow word, because God is declaring something, and the God of the universe, when he says something is beautiful, that is hugely significant. And so we've taken that word and we've actually made it mean more than what it means. If the writers were wanting to convey the idea of perfection, they would have used the word tamim, T-A-M-I-M. And that word actually means complete, blameless, without defect. That, or a derivative of that word, would have been the word that we use there. So that's an example of how we've taken something that really wasn't meant and made some big linchpin or big thing out of it. But then this next word is something that we've kind of made smaller, and that is the word truth. Now, before we get into that, I want to first, I would like to say we're going to center our thoughts today around the Gospel of John. Now, in my opinion, the Gospel of John is probably the most complex book that we have in the New Testament, even more so than Revelation. John is, as a writer, used words that had very deep levels of meaning. And what we've come to realize is that John meant all of them. He meant his book to be this rich source that as I read it, there's more and more depth that I can mine out of it. And sometimes John and Paul does this as well, is they even create words. And so John is a very profound book, and that's where we're going to be centering our focus today on truth. The Greek word that John uses for truth is, it's huge. It's spelled A-L-E-T-H-E-I-A. Aletheia is the way that you would pronounce it. And here's what it means. Truth, but not merely spoken truth. It's truth of idea, truth of reality, truth of sincerity, truth in the moral sphere, divine truth revealed to man, and its straightforwardness. It's also truth as opposed to types or emblems or shadows. It can also mean integrity and rectitude of nature. And you say, Shane, which one did John mean? He meant all of them. So obviously, when we're thinking about truth, our minds tend to narrow in truth versus false. And usually a lot of times we focus on what is written and what is spoken. But what we have to realize is that when John is using this word truth, he's using this vast, huge, beautiful definition of truth. And it really is a 360. It's all encompassing when he uses this idea of truth. It's an incredibly powerful word. And so John, in his gospel, this is one of the things when you spend the time in John's gospel, one of the sub-narratives that is taking place is that John is beginning in his book to create this idea of truth and then how people respond to truth. It's actually, it would almost be like theater or a play or something that you would go and watch where there's this constant representation of truth and emotion. Jesus brings truth, and he's going to say some profound things we're going to look at here, and then how people respond to that truth, especially those who have been steeped in tradition and those who are in power. How do they respond to truth? And so I would encourage you to take some time this week, if you're bored, and really spend some time reading through John, and you can see this beginning to develop when Jesus talks about truth. So I want to focus our minds on a few verses. In John 8, verses 32, 44, and 45, it says this, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. You are from your father, the devil, and you chose to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in" what? Truth, because there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks according to his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell you the truth, you don't believe me. Very, very powerful few verses of scripture here. Actually, John 8 is probably my favorite New Testament single passage. And what we see here is this play on truth and lies and how those steeped in tradition and power respond to Jesus. Jesus tells us that this truth is the thing that is going to set us free, not our emotions. Our emotions are going to enslave us if we are left to follow them by themselves, or our own thoughts will enslave us. But it's truth applied, truth when we view it, truth when we listen to it, that when we take and apply this to our lives, that truth will set us free. We can walk in freedom because of truth. Jesus takes us a step further in John chapter 14 and verse 6. We all know this verse. I could actually spend weeks preaching on this verse. But Jesus says something here that is actually mind-boggling. He says this, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." My brothers and my sisters, this is profound because we just looked at this definition, this all-encompassing definition around truth and the bigness of that. And I would dare say we should adopt that in our thinking, especially in terms of our spirituality. There's this huge concept of truth, and Jesus says, "That is me, and I am that. I am truth." My brothers and sisters, that's a profound statement. It's a statement that obviously the disciples didn't understand. They couldn't wrap their heads around it because this was pre-resurrection. They had no understanding of what that meant, but I'm sure that after the resurrection, this verse expounds in their minds in a huge capacity, like it should ours, that Jesus, God himself, dwelt among us. He is 100% pure truth. Not just in spoken word, not just in written word, but truth demonstrated. He loves. He restores. He serves. He teaches. He renders judgment. All of this is a beautiful picture of truth. Then John expounds upon this further in John chapter 17 and the high priestly prayer of Jesus. He says this, "For the words you gave me, I have given to them, and they have received them and know that it's what? Truth, that I came from you. And they have believed that you sent me. Sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. And for their sakes, I sanctify myself, that they may also be sanctified in truth." So we're seeing this huge concept that John is pushing, that Jesus declares in chapter 8. And we also have a beautiful picture of how truth operates in John chapter 8. But we get this picture of truth setting us free, contrasted to the lies of the enemy. Then we have in John 14, coming back and saying, I am the truth. And then we come all the way into John 17, where he talks about how we operate in this world and how we're sanctified is by the truth that he's spoken, the truth that he's lived out, the truth that he's demonstrated. And we see that come to a pinnacle when he stands in front of Pilate in John 18. Pilate asked him, so are you king? So are you a king? Jesus answered, you say that I am king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth, listens to my voice. Again, equating what he's saying and truth is the same thing. And he's bearing witness. He's living this witness of truth. And then Pilate asked this profound question that really we're all asking in some way, shape, form, or fashion. In verse 38, Pilate asked him, what is truth? Now, there's been a lot made about that, and most of the time we've coupled it more with mockery or jest or the idea that he wasn't buying into what Jesus is saying. And I would like to actually say to you that maybe it might be a little different. Because when he asked this question, he says, what is truth? He then leaves Jesus and goes out to the public, to the powers, to the priests, all those steeped in this tradition that were so threatened by it. And that's the picture that's being painted. Tradition and power is always threatened by truth, if they're not truthful themselves. Even government, you see Pilate dealing with this concept of truth, but after he asks the question, what does he do? He goes out and he says to these powers, to these traditions, to these rulers, and he says what? I find no what? Fault in him. Now, I'm not saying that Pilate had a conversion moment. I'm not saying any of that about Pilate. But what I am saying is I think he had an encounter with truth that really, and if I could say this, boggled his mind. And in defense of Jesus says, I don't find anything wrong with him. He's not deserving of the cross that you want to put him on. My brothers and my sisters, truth is a profound concept. Truth is a deep concept. Truth is what sets us free. Truth should be the thing that comes into our emotions and our thoughts and anchors them to something. And what is that something? It's Jesus. It's Jesus. And that, my brothers and my sisters, needs to anchor all of us so that we have a way to deal with emotion. And we have a way to deal with thoughts. And we can make those emotions and thoughts conform to truth. And that truth is Jesus. If you're anchored to anything else than Jesus, my brothers and my sisters, your anchor will not hold because it's not truth. Truth is Jesus. And he sets you free. He is the truth. So there are a few things that I would like to close with. One is this idea that Paul puts forward in 2 Corinthians, where he says this, for we cannot do anything against the truth, but only for the truth. And what he's saying here is we cannot stand against truth. Truth is what it is. We are powerless against truth because truth always wins. Truth always is. Now, yes, we're constantly rediscovering, discovering truth, but nonetheless, we are powerless in front of it. So here are some questions that I think we need to focus and look upon deeply. Number one, what is guiding me and the choices that I make? What is guiding me and the choices that I make? Number two, are your presumptions true, or are they things that you've been taught or you've believed without putting them through the truth filter? My brothers and my sisters, in our culture, just like every culture, it's expedient upon us to take what we hear, especially what culture gives us, and put it through the medium of truth. And for us, who is that? It's Jesus. Are we willing to change our lives, our thinking, and our habits when we are confronted by truth? Powerful question. Can you see the importance now that, and you need to really think on this, can you see the importance? Can we as a collective see the importance that if we're not anchored to Jesus, if we're not anchored to Him, then there's no anchor at all. And that should frighten us. It should frighten us. So whatever we do, and I often say this in conversations with Dr. John, I say, I hang on to Jesus with all that I have. He is my anchor. He is what I hold on to. My brothers and my sisters, we must all do the same. So let us not be people of feelings, nothing more than feelings. Whoa, oh. Let us be people that brings truth into our feelings and truth into our thoughts.